Welcome everyone. I'm going to ask a quick question of one of my panelists. Can you pronounce your name for me real quick?
Yes. Hello, my name is Natalie Mosqueda.
Natalie. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, welcome everyone. I just wanted to make sure I didn't mess up any names as we're coming in. I think Tony is here also, or will be here soon. Welcome. Because we had to push this back a little bit, I'm gonna have to log off just a little bit early, but Tony's gonna be taking the reins at the end. But you can also see I'm doing this from my car, so I could be with you as long as possible. So I'm Dr. Annie Ranking. Welcome, welcome. And I see Tony on here. Tony, you are muted right now. Oh, there you go. So again, Tony, I can't see you, so I don't know if you're talking or not, but we can't hear you.
I'm talking. I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
Ooh, I don't want to pin myself. Remove pin. So Tony, do you want to introduce yourself quick?
This is a little kind of crazy here, but I'm Tony Potenza, and I'm an emeritus faculty member from Roosevelt University. And Annie and I have been doing competency stuff for, I don't know, the last portion of our lives, easily 5 or 6 years of working on assessment development and curriculum development around the Gateways modules.
Excellent. And I am Dr. Annie Ranking. When we started this, I was a faculty member at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. I am now kind of have my own consulting business, and then also do a lot of things in research. So most of my work is now in research. So welcome to this panel. We are so excited to have this panel. If we can advance to slide 2. The way that we are going to move through this today is Tony and I are going to do a brief introduction about the module process, competencies. We know that this has been in the state of Illinois for a long time, but we can't assume that everyone knows what's happening. So we're going to do a really quick kind of introduction to this, and then we're going to dive into our panelists. We have 4 panelists today, which is really exciting. So Tony and I have specific questions we're going to ask the panelists, but I know that as you're coming on, you may have questions. We're going to ask you to leave those to the end or put them in the chat, and Tony and I will pull them from the chat and be able to engage in those questions at the end of our time together today. But to introduce the module process, as it says here, 2020, 2021, we were starting to take the next steps into implementing competencies into 2- and 4-year universities. And so as we were working together across the whole state, we were aligning ECE, infant toddler competencies. We just recently finished IDC, the director credentials. And so we have our panelists on today to help describe how they've implemented these modules. As we have gone through this over the past several years, there have been some misconceptions and some really great successes on how to implement these modules. And so we really want to make sure we're engaging in this conversation with some faculty members who have been able to really take these modules that were created collectively between 2- and 4-year faculty members and really use them to benefit the students in their programs.
Okay, so the background that we want to share with you, 3 main points. What is competency-based education? Who was involved in the development of the ECE and the ITC modules? And how was that process completed? So competency-based education is an approach to education where learning pathways are designed around measurable outcomes or competencies. In Illinois, we have articulated competencies for early childhood through Gateways in a number of different areas. ECE and ITC are just 2 of the areas. Illinois Director Credential has competencies, school age youth development has competencies, family child care, family support workers, and I think training and development are all of the early childhood areas that have actual competencies or outcomes tied to what those career paths are about. And now the state ISB is moving towards taking the Illinois professional teaching standards and turning those into competencies, as you heard from Kathy Latham yesterday afternoon. So this is a trend across the state of Illinois and a trend nationally as well. Okay, so what are the characteristics of competency-based education? Well, the first thing is the intentional backward design. And as I said before, competency-based education is focused on outcomes. So when you are designing curriculum in a competency-based approach, you are looking at what you want the outcomes to be first, and you start with that. What is it that you want to see your learner actually doing? And so our modules that were developed began with the summative assessments, with what the outcome was going to be and how you knew that your learner had achieved that outcome. And then went on to look at what the steps were to achieving that outcome, and then the types of activities and materials that would support that learning. Competency-based education is rigorous. You don't get a partial score on it. You either pass it or you don't. And so the competency has to be met at the level that is agreed upon. And to be able to say that you have mastered early childhood or an area of early childhood, you have to be able to master all of the competencies within that area. So you can't, there's no partial score on this. You're all in, and you have to be able to show that you can meet all of those competencies. Competency-based education is also very student-centered. The student's learning pathway is really very individual. The student has to really only demonstrate that they have that competency, and they can do that when they're ready to do so. So you may have a student who can demonstrate competency almost immediately because they have work experience or they've taken coursework or professional development that supports that. So it doesn't take them very long to be able to show that they are competent. You may have other students for whom this is something completely new and they will need much more support. It may take a student more, the time to degree is not, or the time to completion is not an issue. It is really about getting it right and getting it mastered. So you may have a learner who can do this like that and get it quickly, and others who may take much more time, and that's okay. And of course, prior learning and experience is recognized. The term that's used is that we're agnostic as to where the learning came from. So if you have a student who can show competency because they learned all of this in professional development on the job, that's great. They don't necessarily have to go through all of the wonderful activities and read all of the readings that you have prepared for them if they can show that they are competent. You may want them to, but if they are able to be competent, that is the critical piece, that they can show their competency. Okay, and so what was the process? We had in 2021 and 21-22 teams of faculty who were working on both the development of the competencies and then piloting the competencies. So this was a 2-year process. Year 1 was development of the modules, and the institutions that were involved in this for the early childhood modules: Illinois State, Northern Illinois University, National Louis, Moraine Valley, and Heartland Community College were the writers of the modules. And we had a bunch of faculty fellows. Faculty fellows were the group of people who developed the assessment tools in the ECE toolbox. And we asked those who had been involved in developing those assessment tools to come back and to review the modules and give feedback on them. And they provided a review process. I'm trying to think now if in the next slide we talk more about that process. So I'm not going to go in and talk in detail about what the process was. But it was an iterative process with lots of review and lots of writing and drafting. In 21-22, we had Southwestern Illinois College, College of Lake County, Chicago State University, Roosevelt University, and Erickson as the authors on the modules. And again, we called upon the faculty fellows who had expertise in infants and toddlers to come in and review the modules. And then in the piloting, and I should go back and say with ECE, the authors were also the piloters. With the ITC, the authors were the piloters, but then we also asked Heartland and Northern Illinois and National Louis to pilot. So there were actually 8 institutions piloting and 5 institutions writing the modules.
Yeah, and so as we dive into the next slide, the process. So Tony's kind of already walked through the process a little bit. Here's a good kind of overview of the process. There are lengthy reports that you can have access to that are on the Gateways website. So please access those if you're interested at all in the process. But basically, as Tony already said, it was backwards design, an iterative process. We had peer reviews, we had consultant reviews, we had CBEN, which is the Competency-Based Education Network consultants come in and help us. And then we also had the piloting for ECE and ITC. And through that process, we were also able to make some adjustments to make sure that they were at the best, highest quality that we could definitely provide with for institutions to use. Teams really got to engage with each other and meet bi-weekly, sometimes more. And not only were we able to develop the modules and really be able to implement this competency-based module system, but one of the biggest takeaways also was the ability for faculty around the state to collaborate with each other and really build some great peer relationships, some great collegiate relationships, and also learn from each other. And so that's where we're really going to go with the panel today. So we're going to share the next slide, and it's going to show us who the panelists are. And I'm going to read you their bios, and then we'll take the slides down so we can actually see who's here. But first up, we have Carolyn. Carolyn is the Early Childhood Education Program Coordinator at Southwestern Illinois College. Her career in early childhood education spans over 35 years in a variety of settings. Next up, we have Nathalise. And Nathalise comes to us from National Louis. She is the Early Childhood Competency-Based Student Success Coordinator and has been in the early childhood field for over 15 years. Her expertise is in coaching and mentoring teachers. She holds her master's in early childhood education from North Central University. As the Student Success Coordinator, she supports students in the program and ensures high engagement, persistence, and retention levels. Next up, we have Melissa from Northern Illinois University. Melissa is passionate about preparing early childhood professionals, and her research focuses on supporting caregiver-child interactions in both home and early childhood settings. She has served as a faculty fellow on the IDC, the Illinois Director Credential, and was one of the faculty authors of the ECE competency-based modules. She led the pilot of ECE modules at NIU, implemented ITC modules, and was a faculty reviewer for the IDC credential modules. And finally, we have Camilla. She is from National Louis also. She holds a master's in child development and an EDS in early childhood education. She is an ECE assistant professor and competency-based program manager at National Louis. Camilla is the creator of the Competency Coffee Shop, which has been a huge success, not only at National Louis, but at other programs. The coffee shop is a community practice for students enrolled in the program. The Competency Coffee Shop is a virtual weekly community of practice that meets every Wednesday, and students enrolled in the program meet with instructors and gather with peers. She is also one of the faculty authors that participated in developing and revisiting the IDC credential modules. She serves as the governance co-chair for undergraduate college at National Louis University. So panelists, welcome. As we take this slide down, I am going to pin our panelists, but Tony has our first question.
I have the first question. So,
Yep.
do we want to do this in any order or just let people jump up?
Yeah, I was going to just,
here?
if we want to just call out people so they don't talk over each other.
Okay, so the first question is, how did you implement the modules and how did you connect them to the curriculum?
And I'm trying to find Carolyn, but we can start. Oh, there she is. Sorry, there's a lot of people. There she is. Okay.
Carolyn,
there's our panelists.
Carolyn, do you want
trying to unmute? It wasn't coming up. Yes. We had these questions given to us in advance, and I had several adjuncts that also implemented the modules. So I just have bullet points what their responses were to all of these questions. So how did we implement the modules in our curriculum? I taught them in our growth and development class. Instead of teaching the infant toddler section that was in our textbook, I implemented the modules in that section. Another instructor in our health, safety, and nutrition class implemented one of the health, safety competencies that was in the modules for the infant toddler credential as extra credit. She did extra credit. In another course, they were used as an extra assignment. And in the infant toddler class, the competency pilots replaced other coursework and other assessments. So we didn't use all of the modules in an entire course. We just used portions of the modules that we had developed and implemented them within various courses.
How did they connect to the curriculum overall? What was that fit like?
Yeah, that might answer one of our other questions, but in our courses, we're using textbooks, whether they're OERs or the traditional textbook. So the modules were different for students, and some of them really had a difficult time transitioning from read this chapter and answer these questions or do this one assignment to read these articles, do a formative assessment, and at the end, complete the summative assessment. For some, that was a really hard transition, especially in some courses where we put this at the very end of the semester, rather than implementing it within the semester and them going back and forth to the different styles.
Okay. All right. And that may relate to a different question too. That's
it did.
Carolyn. Okay. Melissa, how did it work at NIU? You're muted, I think.
Does that work?
Much
Can you hear me
better.
now? Okay, it was my headphones. So hi everyone. So at NIU, we piloted the modules in two different modalities. So we did pilot the modules in our kind of traditional child development courses, and we were maybe a little overzealous in that we piloted all of the modules across our child development courses. So the way that we did that was we looked at where our competencies were already in our child development courses based on our entitled application. So where we already had those competencies living, we implemented the modules in those courses. And then we also implemented them with non-traditional, non-degree seeking students. So we had kind of a pilot program outside of our typical degree structure where students could complete modules to advance their credential level. So we had students that were seeking a level 2 credential. We had students who had level 2 were seeking level 3. And we went up to the level 4 credential because then our program provides the full level 5 credential. So we did have those kind of 2 different modalities, and had very different experiences across those 2 different modalities. To answer how it connected to the curriculum, so as you heard, we embedded them in our traditional child development courses where those competencies live. And so what happened was that the modules essentially replaced what existing assignment that we would have had in that class that semester. And it might be a question later on, but one of the things we quickly realized was that to truly assess each of these competencies takes, the modules were a lot of work for the students. And so we realized we have a lot of competencies in some of these courses. And so it was definitely a lot of work for our traditional students in those courses because they were taking multiple child development courses. So, if one course had 4 to 5 modules in it, but they were taking 3 or 4 of our child development courses, they were doing a lot of modules over that semester.
Thanks. I think maybe when I'm thinking about how it fits into the curriculum, what I'm asking is, was there like a congruity between what was in the modules and what was in your curriculum? Did you feel that you were still on track with what your curriculum goals and what your outcomes were supposed to be?
Yeah, so to give a little bit of context, we are the non-licensure program for child development at NIU. So our courses are not specific to early childhood education licensure or anything like that. So there were some components. Our courses include Gateways competencies, but we also have other pieces that we pull into our courses. So definitely the pieces that were ECE focused aligned with what we did already. And so that was where we were able to just kind of replace that content with the modules. The challenge was when we also had other content that we typically teach in that class that's not specific to Gateways, like to Gateways ECE 5. We were still kind of trying to find that balance of how do we still get to the course objectives that we have that are in addition to the Gateways competencies that are in the class as well.
Carolyn, was there congruity between the modules that you were implementing and the overall curriculum, or what was the content in the course? Did you feel that there was connectivity there?
I think it was connected. I think, like Melissa said, there were some areas that we definitely covered more in depth that were not covered in the modules. And that as far as meeting the competencies, it did meet that. But some of our course objectives, we were not meeting those. So we would have to go back and say, okay, we did these modules, but now you need to go back in the textbook and make sure you cover this so that we met the course objectives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Camilla, how did it work out at National Louis?
So at National Louis, we launched the program with our first pilot group in the summer of 2021. And I'll be remiss if I did not acknowledge Dr. Lisa Downey for implementing and creating the CB program. So we both have a CB program, ECCB program, and a traditional program. So we have our own separate program here at National Louis. And it was self-paced, 100% online. And students, what we mean by self-paced, it was within a 10-week course format. The competencies, all 64 competencies were embedded into our courses. And so students had the 10 weeks to complete their summative assessments. We met with the students and they were completely embedded with those summative and formative assessments into those 10-week courses. We provided students the 10 weeks to complete those courses, those summative, those assessments, and they were not penalized. So within that quarter system, they had the 10 weeks to submit. There was no late assignments, no discussion posts, and we just really worked with those students to ensure that they completed those assessments. They had to complete those assessments with a competent or distinguished in order to pass the course. So a competent was a letter grade A and distinguished as a letter grade, competent was B and distinguished was a letter grade A. We also supported, we had 100% transfer from the AAS and AAEC by starting where you were based on your Gateways level. So students were required to submit their PDR so we knew where gateways level they were at. So if they came in with a level 2, which was required at least a level 2 gateways credential. If they came in with a level 2, then they would take the level 3 courses. Came in with level 4, then they would go so forth. We gave credit to prior learning for CDA gateways levels and practicum and student teaching. And we also offer learning journeys for those students that were interested in the infant toddler credential, the Illinois director credential, the Pell educator license, the ECE, ESL, and bilingual options also. So those competencies were deeply embedded into our courses, and we had a direct pathway different from the traditional courses. Some of our CB courses are aligned with our traditional based courses.
Annie, your turn. Are you
Well, I'm
there?
gonna ask Natalice. Natalice, do you have anything to add with what Camilla had said?
Oh, of course. I'm sorry, Natalice.
No, you're fine. No, we touched base before this, so yes, Camila covered it all.
Okay, awesome. So the next question is, has implementing the competency modules changed how you engage with students in your courses? And if so, how? Melissa, I'm gonna throw this over to you first.
Yeah, and so just like Carolyn said, this was not just me that was implementing these modules. So we had a team of faculty and instructors here, and I also asked them these questions ahead of time as well. So I'll share kind of the collective comments, but I think overall, we feel like it made us more student-centered. You talked about how competency-based education is student-centered, and I think it really did make us more student-centered. Maybe we thought we were being student-centered before, but this really kind of made us look at our teaching practices and our policies. Does this class policy really allow students to demonstrate what they know, what we want them to learn? Are they really able to show us that? And then also the kind of self-paced piece, like what you were saying, Camilla, are we able to, we're within the traditional 16-week semester structure. So of course we're confined to that, but within that, can we provide more flexible deadlines? And then the idea also of allowing students to submit revisions on assignments until they are actually able to be successful with that assignment. So I think just overall, where it's been feasible is that we've really looked at how we can be more student-centered, even in our traditional courses as well.
So Melissa, I'm gonna put you on the spot really quick.
Okay.
Can you think of a specific policy that you might have changed for a course to be more student-centered?
I've always hated late policies. And so that is one that I really worked on trying to build in more flexible deadlines. I don't know if I just froze. This is saying my internet connection is unstable. And then I had always kind of had the policy of revise and resubmit, but I think that was a little bit of an eye-opening policy for my colleagues. I think one of the challenges we have now is that within our child development program, which is part of the larger human development and family sciences, all these child development faculty are doing things a certain way, but then students are having to balance, their other faculty and instructors that are still much more rigid and traditional. And especially as we get further post-pandemic, going back to more rigid from what students had experienced during COVID.
Right.
So it's great that we've become more student-centered, but now the question is, how do we get all of our colleagues to think about, this competency-based approach and how we can be more student-centered?
Yeah, awesome, thank you. So I'm going to throw this over to National Lewis. So Natalice or Camilla, whoever wants to take this question. Again, I'll say how implementing the competencies has changed the way that you engage with students. And you two have, from what I understand, have kind of different roles, and so you might engage with students in different ways, and so this might lead to two different answers of how you've changed engaging with students.
Sure, I'll start. We are very student-centered when it comes to our students and the population we work with. We realize that our population of students are teachers in the daytime. And so we really are accommodating to meet their needs, where they're at. Like I said, we created the Competency Coffee Shop, which meets every Wednesday from 7 to 8. And during that time, all the instructors who are teaching our CB courses are available in breakout rooms, and students are able to meet with those professors. Another requirement of our instructors that we changed is that every Monday, the instructors are posting a video in D2L going over the assessments for that week. And then the students come prepared with their questions after viewing that video on Monday to the Wednesday coffee shop. We really realized we have a varied age generations of students that are in our program. So just really meeting those needs of those students and supporting those students. In addition, each quarter we have a focus group by Dr. Neil Green comes into the coffee shop. All the instructors go into a breakout room where all the students meet with Dr. Green and ask some different questions about the program, get feedback, their thoughts, their concerns, what's working, what's not working. And that gives us information to provide how we can better our program. And that has really worked out a lot. Our program grew rapidly within that first year in meeting the needs of the students. And that's when we hired and created the program position for Natalie Mosqueda to be our student success coordinator. So she can give a little bit more detail about her role in the program.
Yeah, so my role is unique in terms that our students have an additional support system. So I am their go-to person. I make sure that if there is any resources that need to be provided, they, have that available to them because our students are completely online. They don't have that access as our students who are in the traditional program to be on campus and to see those flyers and to see those resources. So we still want to make a community for them and have them a part of our university. But it's a little bit more unique since it's online. So making sure that I am building that rapport with the students. So they touch bases with me from the very beginning. Upon enrollment, I am meeting with them with the enrollment specialist, touching base with them right after they meet with their academic advisor. So I have access to their degree plan. So, and I have that communication with them of where do they envision their career? What are the next steps that they want to take? And then also being that support system with assignments, letting them know this is already something that you are doing in the field. It's just making that academic connection to what they're doing in the workplace. And so once they are able to talk that out and get that confidence, the summative assessments are a bit more easier for them. And they gain that confidence that the next term, it's like I hear a little bit less from them, that I actually have to email them and be like, checking in, how's it going? But, just because many of our students have been out of the academic world for 20 plus years. So they're coming back and this is all new to them. And so just giving them that boost of confidence comes a long way.
So Natalie, my understanding is that your position was created because of the competency-based education. Is that correct? Like you're overseeing the competency-based education.
Not overseeing,
But the students, like ensuring that they're being successful within the competency-based framework.
Correct. And so also because of the ECA's scholarship, so that having that connection as well.
Awesome, thank you. And Carolyn, that same question, has it changed how you're engaging with students?
Yes. I'm having the exact opposite where students were engaging more with me. We've instilled these in our online classes, our face-to-face classes, traditional 16-week classes. So the way we usually have it set up is that everything is due on Friday when they have an assignment or a quiz or a test. So the summative assessment was due on Friday, but they would have formative assessments due, they had to complete those before we opened the summative assessment. And so students would email me or tell me in class, I submitted, 2A, can you grade it so I can go on? And they had to have all of those summatives or those formatives completed before I opened the summative. And what they didn't realize was that the summative was really a culmination of putting together their formatives. So they were just, you know, our next question we have to answer is, what would we do differently? I would let the students see the summative assignment prior to, so they would see how that all fits together. So they actually engaged with me a lot more, because typically I just grade on Friday, sometime during the weekend. Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, but I found with the modules, I had to keep checking Blackboard continuously so they could get all of it graded and make the revisions, and then complete the summative assignment. So for us, it actually led to more student engagement instead of less. So that was my experience with it. One of my other adjuncts said, since the format of the modules was different than what they were used to, I had to add more introductory instructions. So because we were part of the pilot, we could not change any part of the modules, but she did give them a little more additional information as far as how to go about completing them. So didn't change the directions, but make sure you read all the resources, and just gave some heads up, but we couldn't change anything that we did within the modules themselves.
Yeah, and Carolyn, I think that's a good call out. So there was a difference between the piloting and now the implementation piece, right? So for the people who piloted, we really wanted to make sure that every single piece of the module was completed and was done basically the exact same at all of the piloting institutions, just in case there was any changes that needed to be made. But now that we are implementing, our kind of conversation around that has changed a bit. We have open access or OER resources, but some people want to use textbooks for the formative pieces. The formative pieces are more fluid. What really needs to stay true to the module is the summative assessment. That is truly how you're going to know if a student has met the competency or not. And so, yes, so the piloting, it was hard, I think, for some institutions, because it was very clear that we needed to stay very true to the module. And now that we're in the implementation stage, the summative, there has to be clear adherence to the summative, but how you get to the summative, there can be a little bit of flexibility within that. So that's kind of where Carolyn was at with that. Tony, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Okay, and I would add to what Annie just said, that the summative assessment and the rubric are the important factors now in the implementation phase. And then there's a lot more freedom with the activities and the materials that are used to get to that point. Okay, so having gone through this, what do you wish you knew before you started implementing the competency modules? Camilla, what do you wish you knew before you started?
Natalie, start with this one.
Start.
Yes, we tag team on these questions. So this question, this was one of those questions that was like, whoo, like kind of like, what superpowers would you want to have? So with this question, we were thinking of really being student-centered and having, if we had that ability to have the students' insight, you know, how were they going to adapt to this format? What were they going to think about this format? How were they going to interpret the context? You know, we are teaching 4 generations. We have the baby boomers, Generation X, millenniums, Generation Z. And so we know that each generation brings their own unique characteristics and experiences that determines how they prefer to be learning. And so we really wanted to know which format would resonate with them. Did they want more hands-on activities? Do they want to be having those discussions with their peers? But they wanted a presentation about the elements of the competencies. but we did find a solution to this in terms of how Camila mentioned before, is we have our director of online operation come out each term to survey the students. As many of you know, when you send out a survey via email, chances of getting those surveys back are very low. So we actually have that opportunity during our coffee shop where there is no professors in that space. It's only the director of operation conducting the survey format and asking the students about their experience. What do they want to see different? And so from the very beginning, from the pilot group to our first implementation group, we have been making modifications. And this summer, we are really going to dive into all of our courses to see how we could better serve our students and really make sure that we are student-centered.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Camilla?
No, she answered everything.
She got everything.
Yes.
Okay. Carolyn, what do you wish you knew before you started implementing the competency modules?
And I think this is one that I may have answered with the first one, was that our implementation was because we were part of the pilot. And I had worked on some modules, but the module I implemented in my class, I wasn't very familiar with. So once we implemented it and students were done, and all this happened really fast because it was at the beginning of the semester, that's when I noticed that not all of the course objectives had been met within that module. And so then I had to backtrack a little bit, and I wasn't planning on having to do that. And it was time constraints. I just, didn't have enough time to review that prior to. So that's one thing I wish I would have had a little bit more time, was knowing being familiar with the module I was implementing, and then seeing how that fit into the course, and then seeing if there were any loopholes that I needed to fill in before presenting the module to the students. The one thing I really did not anticipate was how big of a shift this was going to be for the students, going from a textbook to resources and doing the formative assessments, the summative assessment. There were a lot of complaints, and I think for the classes that I am using the OERs and free resources in, some of those higher level courses that I use that in, those students are used to that. And these were introductory students, and they're just getting used to college in general. And then I threw in, a big boomerang in there, and they resisted. They did not like it. I think if it would have been in a different course where they would have had the hang of using Blackboard and, using just an outline, it would have been better. But initially for those students, fourth week into the semester, trying to manage everything and throwing this in there with it, it was difficult for them. So that was my experience. My one adjunct who replied to this question said that the format was confusing for the students. Again, it wasn't something they were used to. It wasn't necessarily a problem with the module. It wasn't what they were used to. So that was a huge shift for them.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with a lot of what Carolyn said, and a lot of our instructors and faculty had the same thoughts. So a couple of things that they noted was maybe a better approximation of how long student work would take for these modules, especially because I said, we put so many into a course, and to realize, we as faculty did our best to give estimates for how long we thought things would take, but we all know that that those were estimates, and we were also piloting the modules, so we were doing them as they were written. So that was just a kind of a learning experience with that. Another thing was that just because the module is written and kind of provided to you, I don't think faculty and instructors realized that they needed to still provide additional clarification and directions, and that they had the leeway to do that. And I think, Carolyn, that's what you were talking about, that you had somebody that was kind of providing some more of that guidance. It can be really challenging to implement something that you haven't written yourself. And so making sure that faculty and instructors have plenty of time to go through the modules themselves, and that they can kind of provide directions that they think their students will need. They know their students the best. I think that's something that we wish we just would have had more of, that kind of planning time of figuring out how these are exactly fitting into the courses. And then the other piece is just kind of what foundational material students would need first. We have some of the summative assessments, we're asking students to do interviews or observations, and some of our students don't have they've never done an interview. So like having the basics of a professional interview is a competency that's outside of the ECE gateways, but is a skill that our students didn't have going into that. So kind of knowing upfront, maybe, what kinds of skills are we looking for students to have to be able to demonstrate this competency was another thing for us.
So if I would sum up what you have been saying, essentially, it's a matter of preparing your students to be able to learn in a format that they are not used to learning in, and preparing your faculty to teach in a format that they are not used to. And part of that was because this was a pilot, and so we went into it, and this is one of the things that we've learned from doing this pilot. Annie, I'm going to throw this to you.
So our last question from me and Tony, and I know you all have been sending in some chats, some directly to Tony and I, and some to the whole group. I think that most of
Annie, are you there? We do have the questions that have been in chat, and they will appear on the next slide. Are you okay, Annie?
So we have some audience questions, so keep them coming. Yeah, so I just got the.
We're losing Annie. Bad internet, she says. So to keep this moving, since I still have okay internet, I'm gonna start Annie's question. Is that okay, Annie? All right. What is the biggest takeaway that you have from the module implementation in your courses and programs? Who wants to start? Carolyn?
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway for us was, we weren't able to make any changes because we were part of the pilot. So outside of the pilot, there's probably portions of this that we could change up and really make it fit. But given the constraints that we couldn't make any changes, and it was so quick turnaround, that was a big learning curve for us. So I think some of, the portions of it that can fit, and then we could supplement with the rest. That's the biggest takeaway. And then my one adjunct replied to that question and said, the modules are good toolkits for helping students meet the competencies that we have within the courses. And I also think, I just thought of this, I didn't have it written down, but if you have adjunct faculty that are just starting and they don't know where to start. I know we share all of our course information with our brand new adjuncts, but if they're in a place where that sharing isn't happening so freely, the toolkits might be a good place to start in terms of trying to determine what types of assessments to use.
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, I think that our biggest takeaway was really shifting to focusing on competencies instead of other outcomes. We still do have that kind of, I don't know if you want to say battle between, like, we've got these competencies in the course and we've got these other course objectives, and we're still trying to figure out how do we meld these, but really are our assessments truly measuring our competencies? And like we even went back and looked at our entitled application. I was like, oh, well, here we said an exam was measuring that. which it can, but not to the extent that these modules and summative assessments are measuring these competencies. Which I think is also where the kind of time constraint came from, is that if traditionally courses were measuring some of these things using exams or other less time intensive assessments, then you could do that within that shorter period of time. Whereas if you are truly measuring each individual competency fully, and you're using a competency-based approach where you're allowing students, providing students opportunities to revise and resubmit until they reach competency, that takes time. And so I think that that's where we're at now. Is it's great to hear, National Lewis, that you've got these two separate programs. We don't have the resources to do that right now. And so we are trying to figure out, how do we fit competency-based education within our traditional course structure that we still are kind of stuck in, for lack of a better word. And then also, are there ways that we can use PLA to make this more individualized within a course? Maybe a student doesn't have to do an assignment because they've demonstrated competency on that already. So just kind of trying to figure out creative ways that we can use these modules within our traditional course structure.
And Natalie or Camilla, whoever wants to step up, or maybe both of you, what your biggest takeaways are.
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway is that it helps to break down the complex topics into a smaller, more manageable chunks for the students. They are able to focus more on the topics and the skills at one time. I feel like it helps with their retention and understanding of the materials, and helps the learning process be a little bit more flexible for them. As we know, they are working in the field. So they are able to pace themselves in our 10-week term. And then if need be, they could, review the material, review the formative assessments, get a better understanding. In our D2L shell, we have where they are able to take a self-reflection quiz, which will then let them know, okay, you are ready to tackle that summative assessment, or you need a little bit more support. So go ahead and review the formative assessment as well. And then this also just helps us provide a more structural and organized learning experience, both for the students and the instructors. But at the end of it all is we have a really solid team. And I think that helps us in that we collaborate with one another, and we are listening to our students. And so in our weekly meetings, we're coming back with students' feedback to make sure that we are, again, being student-centered.
And just to add to that, when Natalie said that, support is key. I think with this implementing a new program, to have a supportive team makes it easier and smoother and to collaborate. And just in addition, it's a mind shift of learning for both faculty and student. So we do provide students on that first coffee shop, that first Wednesday of the quarter, we provide a student orientation where we go over PowerPoint slide and go over the format. We go into D2L, we talk about the syllabus, we talk about expectations, we review the learning journeys. And also a week before the quarter starts, we have a faculty orientation with all those instructors teaching those CB courses, because we also had to shift their mindset because there are no deadlines. They have a 10-week quarter system. And so those who come from a traditional based course system really has to change their mindset on that. We're working with students and being available for those students in the evening to meet with students, being available on Wednesday as a requirement for instructors who are interested in teaching CB, that they have to be available on that Wednesday evening because students are expecting to meet with their very professors during that. So support is key in what we learned for this implementation, and having key people involved that are dedicated and really focused on making the program successful. And also I forgot to say that we do have a CB advisory board. So that's with faculty and staff. We meet quarterly, and we, divulge and go over different things that we're working on, updates, and getting feedback from those different faculty and staff to provide their input in the program.
That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to pull up my screen again, and we do have some questions that came in through the chat to look at. And after we go through those, we will open it up to anybody who really has questions that they
And I'm
want.
back. Sorry, guys. As we've said the last 3 years, gotta love technology, right? One of the questions that Tony's going to bring up on the screen has to do exactly with that weekly coffee house. So the last question that's going to come up on the screen, I think that we can just nicely kind of feed into the coffee house. So our students, so this can be for Natalice or for Camilla, are students required to attend it? And if not, how do you get them to attend?
So we say it's highly recommended that they attend, because that gives them an opportunity because students are taking multiple courses. So all of those students taking CB courses, all those professors teaching those courses are there available at that night, on that Wednesday night, so that they know that if I couldn't meet with my professor during the week, I know on that set date that I could get my questions answered. We say don't wait till Wednesday to ask your questions. We are available to schedule individual meetings with them. But it's been a great success that during our first coffee shop, we had 96 students in attendance. So they know that we are available during that time. And we also have presentations during that time, also to support students. We have our content test specialists that attend. So those students going through the Pell for licensure, we have our content test specialists in a separate breakout room to answer any questions. They go over test questions and really get them prepared for the content test. And we have different speakers to provide support. We provide support from library services. They come out to the coffee shop. So we try to keep them engaged so they want to attend the coffee shop. And Nellie, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, and it starts from the very beginning, from our informational sessions. We're mentioning our coffee shop to our enrollment specialists, informing them about the coffee shop in the program, their academic advisor, when they meet with me. So it's constantly throughout their term that they're hearing about our coffee shop. And with our pilot group and the first group to go through it, they sold the coffee shop to everyone and the importance of it. And because their professors are available on that day, they already have it on their calendar. Like, this is my day to get all my questions answered. So we pride ourselves on that. We really have been starting to establish this community of practice with the students.
Excellent. As we're diving into the other audience questions, one of the notes that I want to point out that Julie Lindstrom informed me of when we had a meeting about this forum is that the IDC, so the ones we just completed, so ECE and ITC are fully implementing, and you can have access to those. But if you would like to have access to those or to the IDC, the Illinois Director Credential, after this forum, all you need to do is send Julie just request in an email, request access to ECE, ITC, or IDC, and send her a Gmail account. That is one of the biggest, that is the way that we are providing it right now. You have to have a Gmail account to be able to access them. And so if you want to access any of the modules and you don't have access to ECE, ITC, or IDC, just send Julie Lindstrom a request in an email and give her a Gmail account that she can provide you access to. One of the other questions that came up is, what if a student doesn't meet the competency? And along with that, what has the amount of grading been challenging to keep up with when there's multiple revisions and different point systems? So I'm not going to kind of call anybody out, but any of the panelists who want to answer that. So what if they don't meet the competency, and what has been challenging, if there's been challenges, about the multiple revision and grading?
At National Louis, so we let students know from the very beginning, we're on the 10-week system. We recommend that they do not wait till the 9 weeks to submit all their summative assessments. That way we can provide them with feedback to resubmit. At Ashton Lewis, they can resubmit as many times as they want until they receive a competent or distinguished. After that second submission of receiving a developing from that summative assessment, we require the student and the faculty member to meet with that student individually, set a time, and go over the summative assessment. Sometimes it's just they're not fully understanding, or they may have missed a couple of the components to complete the summative assessment, but they can continue to resubmit, and they can also resubmit if they receive a competent to receive a distinguished. So there's no pressure in exactly, I have this set date to, complete this, or I'm going to fail the course. Also, our grading system is A, B, or F. It's not like in a traditional program, we have C, D, F. So if you receive a developing on a course, you are not going to pass the course. Our design of our courses are the competencies are embedded. So depending on the course, they may be between 4 to 7 modules in the course. In order to pass the course, they must receive a competent or developing on all 4 or 7 of those modules. So even if they submitted all 7, and passed 6, but they did not pass that 7th one, they failed the course. So it's very clear in understanding that we give that information to them during that orientation, so they know that it's not that traditional course where, oh, I could just pass the course by completing 6 and still receive a C or a D. And that shows that they're competent in mastering those competencies.
Kira, I see that you're waving your hand as well as having your hand up. Did you have something to add to this topic? Lost Kira.
You're muted.
One sec. Oh, I just wish that Zoom had a me too. Like, Camila, I'm just sitting here nodding and I'm loving what you're saying. I have used a mastery-based approach to my grading and evaluation for many years. But I live in a sea of very traditional assessment at my institution. And so when Melissa was bringing up those concerns, Melissa, like, I wanted to sign to you. Oh man, I feel that. And my anecdote, I've not done any concrete research with my students, and I need to, because people have been telling me I need to for years. But my students have run into that for many, many years, where Dr. H, you're doing things one way, and they see the connection to our practices in early childhood education, but that's not necessarily what they're seeing in their gen eds that they're taking, or even sometimes on the ECE teams that I have been on, because we get to own our philosophy and approach to education, and everybody has something that might be a little bit different. I'm wondering, for Natalie and Camila, do your students at NLU take other courses in other departments that are not buying into competency-based education and are not seeing the value in a mastery approach to instruction and assessment? And how do your students grapple with that if they have to do any of those gen eds? So there's my question for the group.
Yes, our students do, depending on what they're coming in with. Some do have to still take gen ed courses, and it is a struggle. It really is a struggle for them because of those deadlines that they do have to meet, because of, the weekly discussion posts that they need to do, like the layout is different for them. But because we do have that community of practice, that gives them that sense of relief that I have this support here with these courses, because our students are not flipping between other early childhood classes. They're not flipping in between traditional and CB format. If you are in the CB classroom, we really try to design it that they're only taking ECE CB courses. And so then having me as that support system, I kind of, I'm that support in helping them facilitate, time management, talking with their professors, getting, reaching out to tutoring, the writing support system, giving them those tools to be successful in those general ed courses. Fortunately, many of our students don't have to take too many, so it's not a big stressor, but it is different. But just letting them know, you know, we are here to support you. And then when the other professors do know that the students are in a CB format, they do work with them a little bit more. And so, you know, we're having that open dialogue. And because we also have our CB advisory team, those who are on that also are traditional professors. So we're having that discussion with everyone.
We are.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Probably have just a few minutes left, and we have one more question about how institutions handle financial aid and transfer policies when implementing CB. Do any of you have comments on financial aid and transfer policies? Has that been affected by doing a CB approach?
So here, the only thing that we are working out and creating systems is for our credit for prior learning courses, just because they first start off as a zero, and Alicia could hop on this as well, because it's not it's a pass or fail, so it doesn't transfer to a grade level. Go ahead, Alicia, since you
No, that's correct. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Alicia Mino. I am the director of the ECE competency-based programming. When it goes to the CPL, students are awarded credit. And so they are not enrolled in a course where they're receiving the grade where the scholarship would cover that. And so as of this moment, the scholarship is not covering the fees associated with the CPL because the student pays a fee rather than the tuition that's covered by the scholarship, and the fees based on the amount of core hours that they're going to be awarded. So we are hoping in the future to either find a way for the scholarship money to help cover the fees or find a way to organize the fees so that it is something sustainable for the student to undertake.
I am going to move forward with this, be to the last slide, which has the contact information for our panelists. And I'm sure that nobody will be upset if you email them with other questions that you have. I'm seeing now that from Julie that they're going to close the session in 3 minutes. So I want to take this opportunity in the 3 minutes we have left to thank our panelists, to say that this process was a learning experience for all of us. There is no question. And even for Annie and for me, we did the ECE, the ITC, and the IDC module development. And each time we learned something new about how you develop curriculum modules. And I am sure, and we were not part of piloting other than to attend the meetings and hear what was happening at the piloting. So I am sure that for people starting this process, it will be a learning process as well. But we do have some track records here in our panelists. And so if you are thinking about moving into competency-based education, about using the modules that were developed, if you want to put your foot in the water and you have not started that already, you have people here who are your resources for doing this work. And you should certainly take advantage of them and all of the other materials that Gateways has available to you. Any comments, final comments from anyone? Well, thank you all so very much. And I, it's the weekend. Have a great weekend. And thank you for coming.